My name is Thom Cobb, C-O-B-B. I am a professor emeritus, which means I'm retired from Slippery Rock University in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, and I'm now freelancing a lot, and I'm also president of the National Dance Education Organization. Predominantly, I was a modern dancer, improvisation person, and then my real love is jazz. I met Daniel Negrin in spring of 1979, my first year at Slippery Rock. I was young. When I came to Slippery Rock in the fall of '78, modern dance did not exist. No one knew what it was. I was kind of the first real dancer they'd ever hired. And so they hired me through the PE department to really develop a major. In the spring of that year, '79, the performing arts, through the performing arts presenting people through student government had already booked this man named Daniel Negrin to come to campus as part of the performing arts series. Why they did it, I have no idea, because no one knew what modern dance was. I don't think they knew who Daniel Negrin was for sure, and it was all a student project kind of a thing. So they picked him up at this little regional airport, brought him to Slippery Rock, which is very rural anyway. They give him the keys to the green car and say, oh, by the way, your hotel is outside of town, a dive. Here's the keys to the car, here's your schedule, you've got a performance tonight, have a nice week, period. Nobody stayed with him, he had no guide, he had no connection. So I knew he was doing a performance that night. So I went over to the theater about 4:30 to make sure everything was okay. And I go to the back, I walk in, I'll never forget it. Remember this 36 years ago, and it's like it was yesterday. And I walk in the theater, and I'm at the back, and he's on the stage setting sound. And I said, Mr. Negrin, can I speak to you? And he said, well, who the hell are you? And I go, okay, this is a good meeting. So I walk up the stage, and I said, I trust everything is going okay? He says, you trust wrong. There's nobody here. I've got no sound help. I've got no tech help. I did all the sound tech myself. I did this myself. I did this. And I am not a happy person. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. And I said, he says, there are no contact people. I said, well, you have one now. And so I helped him set up. I mean, immediately, I'm basically trying to be a lifesaver, trying to be a connector. He did a performance that night, which included Getting Well, the piece based upon him after his leg surgery or his leg injuries. He did Strange Hero, which was still my favorite piece, which I was fortunate to have performed bits and pieces of. And two of his other big work, Strange Hero, he did Path, the one with and 36 years ago, and that's how indelible it was. He had maybe 30 to 40 people in the audience. It was a miserable first day. So afterwards, he was hungry, and we have a great sub shop in Slippery Rock, Bob's Subs. Best subs in the world. I said, what do you want? He goes, I need something to eat. I said, what do you want? He goes, I want tuna fish. I went, cool. So we buy a Bob's sub, about this, cut it in half, go out to his hotel room, which is a dive, and I happen to have a 6-pack of beer in my car. So we go into his hotel room. He has a half a sub, I have a half a sub, and we have a beer. And now I realize I am talking to a living history book. And so he was there the next 3 days. I was never more than 10 feet away from him. And he taught several different classes, one in particular that stays with me, which has affected my life. It truly has. His first improvisation class opened my eyes to a lot of different things too, but he was taking his jazz class in blue jeans and a Bob Sub t-shirt that he bought. And so we're going across the floor with these wonderful little things. And there were 3 guys in the class, me and 2 students who were not dance majors, and then all these women. And he's doing these big kicks. Well, my legs would go high at that time. Well, the girls are sloughing off. And the boys who are not dancers, they're working their butts off. So we do this about 3 times. Daniel stops and says, come here. And we all gather around. So we're waiting for the explosion. And he says, I like having boys in class. Boys take risks. Boys fall out of trees and break their arms. Boys run after a ball in the street and they get hit by a car. I wish you girls would take a risk. Well, the legs were about 8 inches higher. And I have never forgot that story for 36 years. And I still use that story. And then I ran across Danny several times at American Dance Festival, ADF, where I took all of his improv classes I could. He was always very gracious. He said, Thom, right? Slippery Rock. And you can't forget the name. And he always said, was Bob Subs there? And I said, still there. And I should have brought him a tuna sub. And we have a colleague, my colleague at Slippery Rock, Jennifer Keller, did her MFA work at Arizona State. And when she moved from Arizona State to Pittsburgh, she was going to be teaching part-time for us and working with Dance Alloy. It was so sweet. Danny said, say hi to Slippery Rock for me. Say, if Tom's there, say hi. And so all of his books have been incredible. But that one moment, 36 years ago, touched me, as you can tell, so deeply that and I only hope, and this has been one of the things that Danny's legacy has left me, that 36 years from now, some student's going to remember something I said that's going to change their life, and then they'll, 36 years after that, they'll say that. He autographed my undergraduate history book that I used in undergraduate dance history by Olga Maynard called Four Pioneers. It was published in 1965, so don't even go there. And he's mentioned in a couple of pages. Now, he was just an upcoming, well, he'd been around, but finally had reached, at least a point where people really knew who he was. And so he autographed it. And every night, though, we would go out to the motel room, Bob Sub, 6-pack of beer, and we would talk. And I would ask him all the questions. I felt like I was, sitting at this master's, which I was, and asking about all the early years and his work with Tamiris and the work being blacklisted and the whole, that whole 50s thing of the McCarthy eras and all these sort of incredible things that I only read about. Well, now I'm talking and touching the real deal. And in a very brief first encounter, it was lifelong. Yeah, I used the improv book quite a bit. I used Jimmy Penrod's book for a while, which I really love. And then I got away from books because, I'm going, well, it's improvisation. And then you, as an improvisational teacher, you start to run out of ideas for facilitation. And so that's when I went to Danny's book. And it's been valuable. So I recommend it to a lot of my students as you're going in to teach, because you can't teach improvisation. He actually said that. You can only facilitate it and guide it and instruct, but in essence, you can't teach someone how to, do that. It just is, that's what you do, and you can't explain that. Him coming out of the period of time when he was developing as a dancer and when he was coming into his prime, a lot of that has influenced my style of jazz. My jazz is very based on authentic work, and his has that authentic root to it, that authentic feel to it. It's not externalized. It's not balletized. He uses terms as we all do, like chasse or something like that, but it's based upon and rooted in the real internalization of what jazz is, the relationship of jazz to the music, acknowledging full well that jazz, first and foremost, is an African-American form, period, in statements, one of the few American art forms we have. And so he helped reestablish my connection to those roots and the importance of them. The dance comes from inside out versus, the outside in. And again, that stayed with me for a 40-year teaching career. The cakewalk was a dance that was originally done in the plantations by the African-American slaves. It's a strutting dance, and you have this, and a lot of times you're in tuxedo or whatever, and people thought it was a parody of the Old South, about how these people walked in this. Well, what they didn't know is that the blacks were parodying the white landowners. And then the white landowners would do these cakewalks. It was just a totally different thing. And part of the essence of the cakewalk is it's a kind of a strutting competition, so you could strut the best. What was the prize? A cake, food. And then it became one of the first popular vernacular dances of the 20th century, since the African-American community had finally gotten a little bit of recognition in the traditional white society, and then it became one of the most popular dances of the 1900s. And at NDEO, when we were in LA 2 or 3 years ago, Ann Hutchinson Guest and I led a cakewalk through the lobby of the Kyoto Hyatt Regency, all the way through the lobby around to the banquet. And I had sent out directions, so we had about 40 people doing this cakewalk. And he always talks about it. Again, that's his roots of authenticity. And again, the impact throughout all of this, if I were to replay it and go back and really analyze it, the authenticity, the real internalization of what dance is, has stuck with me. And I didn't start dancing until I was 19. And it was very young when I started teaching, and I was young when I met Danny. I was only 26, maybe, something like that. And like I said, 36, 37 years later, somebody asked me, and the story just rolls off, just like that. Because I started so late, I didn't have any outside influences on me when I first started. It all came from here, because I didn't know any better. And I started doing this stuff, and I went, oh, that feels like this, and that's cool. And then I learned technique as I went through, obviously. But my roots started as just dancing. And then when I met him into my career 5 or 6 years later, it just reinforced, as I said earlier, I think, what I thought internally dance was about. And then when someone of his caliber, you see that you share that vision and you kind of share what his philosophy is, and you see where it's taken him in life, and then you start reading about what he went through in life. It just, and the other thing that this may seem a little bit odd, another big influence on me of Daniel, he's a man. And that's not a sexist comment. I would say 90% of my teachers were women. 95% of my students have been women. I love working with women. I love working with men. But my experience with Daniel, and then eventually, even prior to that, with Merce Cunningham and Eric Hawkins, those are the 3 men who I worked with. And I went, wow. And they're very much influential in a male dancer's life, specifically as a young man. It's like, wow, this is cool. I always go back to the sense of his sense of internalization, his sense of reality, his sense of power, his sense of drive, and I've tried to be that. I think I always was that kind of a teacher, because I'm a very good teacher, but then what he said, even just in brief time in our lives together, just reinforced it. And I said, okay, that is something I can cling to. Let me learn more about it. And so whenever I could, I would take class with him, and it just kept strengthening that. And I would hope that my students would say the same thing about me. That what do you think is the power of his teaching was, and that the authenticity and the realization of it's human movement first, and then we'll layer stuff on top of that as well. Other than to spend 3 evenings in a hotel room with Bob Subs and a 6-pack of beer, talking with a living history book, is something I will cherish the rest of my life. In my Olga Maynard book, I have Daniel Negrin's autograph. And when I retired, I gave almost all my books to the library. My very good dance collection I gave to our department. I have a collection of dance magazines from 1968 to 1978 that are mint condition. I gave those. And as I was cleaning out the office, I came across my Olga Maynard book. And I'm sitting there cleaning the office out, my last day of teaching, and there's Daniel's signature, or wonderful citation that he wrote. Eric Hawkins' autograph is in that book. Carmen de Lavalade autograph is in that book. Merce Cunningham's autograph is in that book. And it's just, it's gold. So that one stays in my family.